Where were you when you heard Governor Pritzker declare a shelter-in-place order in response to COVID-19? For my family, we were traveling back from Patrick's appointment at St. Louis Children's Hospital on Friday, March 13th, 2020. Little did we know, or even expect, how life-altering a novel virus pandemic would become. While there was some time given before the shutdown was to take full effect, it was decided quickly that due to a majority of our congregation's population being in that at-risk category for serious illness or even the possibility of death from this new virus, we held our first online worship service with a laptop on a music stand in front of the baptistry on March 15th. Then we held worship for several weeks at our dining room table. And each day receiving more information and having to change all of our habits, all of our resourcing, and all of our living to both slow the spread of the virus and to limit the transmission. We did not know that we would not even be able to return to our building for in-person services until June, or be even in this sanctuary in July. An invisible scourge of fragmented genetic code swirling in a ball of grease revealed both all of our strengths and our inherent but yet invisible weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Suddenly, those overstocked shelves of household supplies were empty. Anxious demand greatly outstripped the present supply of personal protective equipment of masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. Panic gripped the market as the patterns of purchase shifted from routine to stockpiling. Self-interest turned to selfishness. This must be the end of an era, or even the world now. How different will this new era or world become? Can we return to normal? More importantly, should we return to it? A crisis always has the potential for life-changing beliefs and practices, to change the behavior we do, or it can become merely a slight and inconvenient departure from the normal routine, where life seemingly resumes near to that path it had been before the crisis even happened. These two impulses are constantly at work, back to normal, or things will never be the same. Some still remember in those faded childhood memories the pronounced changes of our nation in the midst of the Great Depression and its rapid response to World War II. A nation that was united in sacrifice for the war effort to defeat evil forces gripping the world. All families in some aspect were impacted, and some were forever impacted with the telegrams that had the opening words, "I regret to inform you." Much of the structures of our civilization emerged from that global crisis with the intent to prevent another similar civilization disaster to ever occur again in human history. Closer to our collective historical memory is the events of September 11th, 2001. In shock, in grief, but later with military might, we responded. It altered our sense of security, and it certainly altered how we board airplanes. But in a larger sense, other than those families who've lost lives in that horrible, inhumane act, or the families of soldiers killed in deployment in the War on Terror, now approaching its 20th anniversary, most of our day-to-day living appears to have gone unchanged, practically uninterrupted. We can embrace back to normal even more quickly than things will never be the same. If what occurred really was not felt or experienced by us personally, and we fall again for that oldest act of rebellion against God and against each other, the belief that somehow we can now live lives as if we are separated from the earth we must live on and the responsibility to care for each other on this same planet. The rules about how we will exist are separate in some way from the consequences of those rules. It is always possible that even the current pandemic will not change anything in any lasting way. Not even the age-old lesson that our God-given abilities do not separate us from our God-given responsibilities in a system of interlocking relationships between creator and creature and among ourselves and the world we all must live in. The most powerful structures we have built from the playing cards of civilization, whether it's marketplace or employment, extraction or exploitation, individualism or collectivism, nationalism or globalism, were rendered weak, incompetent, and overwhelmed by a mere greasy ball of rogue DNA passing over our transportation networks, all of our demarked lines of illusion and influence we call national boundaries, through a substance we all need and cannot fully control, our atmosphere and air. One life lesson from this year is this: even when it is ignored, life will speak on our living and judge it such. And if life is having its say, we must ask and listen for what God may be saying in it. The scripture reading today is revealing what God said to the people of Judah thousands of years ago. And God is announcing its impending doom and destruction. Now, it was only the first chapter of a 3-chapter section of Isaiah known as the Isaiah Apocalypse. Now, Hollywood has greatly exaggerated and misinterpreted both the role and the purpose of an apocalypse. We probably think disaster movie or future prediction when we hear the word apocalypse. But at its heart, an apocalypse simply means unveiling or revealing. It reveals the spiritual truth, giving us an opportunity to see all the lies that we have been living in, all the lies that we keep telling ourselves are truths, and that dissonance between what God is calling forth and where we have not seen or heard, responded or acted upon God's will and purpose. Yet most apocalypses in Scripture express hope in also its call to change. Isaiah describes for us shuttered homes and dying vineyards that will both one day be open and also will possess new life. If we choose to use our God-given capacity to turn our lives back towards God's will and purpose. I believe another one of the life lessons of our experience together in 2020 is a lesson in faith. We act faithfully when we act out the truth that the well-being of all of us depends on the well-being of each of us. We cannot pretend that our treatment of the vulnerable among us does not affect the rest of us. In a time of crisis and emergency, it is our common response, our ability to act collaboratively and change radically that defines us. No matter how much we try to separate ourselves from one another, the more inextricably it is revealed how much we need to remain connected in the first place. The air that right now I breathe out must eventually become the air that others will breathe in. We've developed a new identity in this crisis. The essential workers. Often these jobs, these roles were cast down, cast out, and nearly an invisible hand between what was available and what was needed. And this revealed to us another lesson in faith. Our way of life can never be just about ourselves. Most of our lives are lived on an exchange system, if we're honest about it. We do participate in that exchange system in order to receive something out of the same system. This exchange system is not too different from a hamster wheel. Or should I say hamster wheels? You see, we try to spin plates or spin these wheels of busyness, productivity, and economic growth constantly. And yet this unholy trinity seems to have come to us all at a real price. At the price of dignity, community, and yes, our faith. We believed that these three things could save us. Their saving power crumbled in the face of an invisible enemy, drifting without favor, preference, or prejudice. But the choices remain the same, as it always has remained: life-giving or death-dealing. We can choose the death-dealing schemes and structures or a life-giving God. A God of compassion and healing, who calls us from the dark tombs, the empty vineyards, the shut houses of our own deceived designs, and draw us into a new life from our stack of death-dealing cards of lies that still cause us to separate and divide, to deny our community, and to strive to rule everyone else at all cost. We can choose to no longer be bound by the lies of any power, any structure, or any system that's trying desperately to rebuild the house of cards, now exposed in tatters by an unseen scourge, now revealing its power as a fable, its structure as myth, and its system as inadequate. For the life of faith is hope overheard. Hope that's whispering in the bonds of mutuality, the interconnected nature of creator and creation, creature to creature. We are made in the image of one who celebrates relationships beyond our possibility of even remotely understanding. The lesson of 2020 is that 2020 is probably not the end of the world. We have always had a choice rather than an unalterable fate that we resign ourselves to. We can choose to play God with a house of cards of our own making, or we can choose God to rebuild a house of truth and transformation. The worst action we could do, from the lessons we're learning in life together in 2020, is to just go back unchanged to our former 2020 patterns and lives. Placing our trust in the same old gods, idols though that they are, the same powers, same structures, the same systems that have failed before and failed again and will probably fail us in the future. Will we listen to what life in 2020 is whispering, saying to us? Will life's whispers and pleads reveal what God is trying to say to us? Your answer to that question will be revealed by which path you choose. Back to normal or changed evermore. Amen.